All right, good morning, everybody. We're here with Scott Walker to discuss the Lignijoule on this fine Friday morning. Take it away, Scott.
Hey, good morning, folks. Thanks for joining us. For those that don't know me, I've been doing a lot of research and development on biologicals and biostimulants for a number of years. Got 3 new ones on the go as we speak. The Lignijoule is one of my favorites because I've done so many years of it. When it was first introduced to me, the Lignijoule actually didn't have rates or timings and much methodology, nor did it have much science. But after getting some applications done with the assistance of CLS years ago, we started to develop rates and timings, and that sort of evolved. That's been over a period of close to 14 to 15 years today. So as we move forward, just to make sure you understand that I'm all about looking for the return on investment as I do a lot of the research today. There's so many different materials out there along the lines of biologicals and biostimulants. So I'm trying to figure out how do we recognize them, how do we generate the greatest ROI from their use, and also now it's starting to spin off into other things because we're paying attention to an awful lot of side effects, you might call them. That would be spin-off effects, whether it's regenerative processes of our soil environment, creating a less disease pressure, better nutrient efficiencies. And the Lignijoule, through my research, has really identified the opportunities for those. So there's the new sticker that Daryl's put together over the years that had a former name before when it came from overseas, but now we refer to it as Lignijoule. So in my travels here and there around different parts of the world, I attend what they call the World Congresses of Biological Stimulants and Biologicals. This is one of the definitions, for instance, that some of the various areas of the world are coming up with to identify what a biostimulant actually is, how to categorize it. And of course, that's all mainstreamed in an effort to generate proper labeling. As many who appreciate that are in this crowd, there are a lot of products out there that really haven't generated a whole lot of proper label structure, and mostly due to our government regulatory bodies. So what is Lignijoule? Right off the bat, to give you an idea, it's basically a manufactured biopolymer energy source. It's derived from plant-based lignins via the pulp industry. To make paper white, you have to remove the lignins, which are black, in your efforts to make paper white. So they took that and they pulled it through a whole process, 6 patented process, to the point it's 100% water soluble. There's a new video on the CLS webpage that shows just exactly how soluble it is. It's instantaneous when it goes into water. But basically what they've done is they've measured the energy that's involved in this particular product, because through the scientific research at universities, they were identifying a lot of different aspects to how it was responding. So they could understand after a while when they looked at the photosynthesis, it really was an application of energy. And in the science world, they refer to that as kilojoules. And for instance, you see the name Lignijoule, hence its name. It comes from plant-based lignins, and it carries an energy level of 13.9 kilojoules. So as you go forward, we look for the different methods of application, which there are numerous. And it's really the organic carbons that are in the lignins that really helps the plant to create its ability to increase its photosynthesis. Now, with that in mind, you're wondering, well, why do we talk energy? I think an example I'd like to use here real quickly is if we're out ice fishing and I'm asked to go get some wood from the back of the truck to beef up the heat and the fire, the question is there, what piece of wood do I get? At what stage of the fire? How cold are we? Do I get a piece of oak? Do I get a piece of poplar, a piece of pine, a piece of cedar? All those different types of wood, of course, when they burn, they give off a different amount of heat. And that is the lignins and the other elements in that plant that are giving off that heat in the form of kilojoules. It's just a method of measuring it. So a lot of this stuff is all supported, as you'll come to see, through third-party replicated research plots, as well as numerous universities. And I'll only touch on some of that scientific stuff today. So of course, we got our soil biological stimulation. These are the different kinds of attributes that you'll see developed if you start measuring activity in the soil, and you'll see a significant increases in the level of bacterial activity and or the biological bacteria activity. And that in turn is really what you're converting with the efficiencies of this energy, creating higher levels of plant food availability. And that's where we start to realize, how do we swing this whole paradigm shift of understanding what we're creating below the surface of the soil. We're so prone to keeping an eye on the crop and identifying diseases and trying to correct issues that are generated from Mother Nature or soil habits. But you can see that the majority of our efforts really are signaled from the soil environment. So as you'll see through this presentation of generating higher photosynthesis and mineralization of fertilizers, it's really in turn a soil process. The greater the health of that soil and my ability to generate the release of nutrients is really what drives the growth of the plant. And in turn, it begins to create the ROIs that we're looking for. So the first step will be, I'll look at photosynthesis. I'll go through the mineralization of putting it in the soil. I'll show why you get standability from its repeated use. And of course, the be all and the end all, the whole idea is getting higher quality and higher yields to create the ROI. That's why you would ever look at using a product. Hence my nickname nowadays is Scotty Walker. I'm looking for the data that supports the sale of the product. So we'll start off with the photosynthetic process. It's a very simple process of sunlight and moisture and carbon dioxide. We hear so much about carbon dioxide nowadays, it would make you almost get upset, but we are farming carbon dioxide. We convert that carbon dioxide into organic carbons of many types and forms. They drive down through the plant system, accumulate there, as well as they create a whole exudate process of feeding the biological world underneath. How do you test it? You'll just basically look at testing the various forms of carotene and chlorophyll. It's a rather simple process. It's not super expensive other than the equipment that does it. And you can see there, even when they measure the level of photosynthetic production in a pod or in a stem, I mean, it's large. The increases are huge. And that's what drives this product's ability to create the ROI at the other end of the spectrum. So what does that look like to us? Well, this is a particular photograph that was created for a field day, where my station at that field day was to help the people understand what it meant to be a biostimulant. And I was using the ligno as an opportunity to show what it really does. Right off the bat, when you look at this photograph, you see those roots and you'll go, well, look, it grew roots. Well, no, it didn't. All it did was generate a higher level of photosynthetic production. Those exudates were flowing through the root system into the soil with the right signaling, and the soil responded by releasing the food that was there at the plant's bequest. Now the plant goes on a feeding frenzy. And that took 6 days to develop that response. So the photosynthetic activity that is generated from its application as a foliar is quite rapid. It happens within hours. I've had guys tell me under certain growing conditions, and they shut the sprayer off at 11 in the morning, and when they go back out there after the heat of the day, when they go back spraying, when it's safe and comfortable temperatures back at 5 o'clock, they've seen a different pattern of growth by the time they get back there in a matter of hours. And again, that's what generates your whole process. So you can imagine, as we drive these different things into the soil, look at the way the soil changes in terms of its fluctuation. There you've got the ligno down with a starter fertilizer, then you have a coal-based humic acid that everybody's talking about. I'm always testing those because they're getting all this attention. And there's on the far right of that photograph is where there's all it is a starter with no additives. And you can see how we are able to identify some serious changes of the soil profile. Now you can imagine the plant's ability to forge nutrition if it's fluctuated like it is on the left compared to the middle nor to the right. And that again creates all those efficiencies of the plant's ability to assimilate the nutrients out of the soil. So for instance, if I put this on with a 1034 row in the seed row, this is the kind of growth response you'll get. You see that your tillers are developing really conform to the main stem, so there isn't a competition for the sunlight. Then this is another photograph. So these are the sort of things that I identify year in, year out. It's a regular scenario. Believe it or not, you don't see it from the road driving by. What it really shows up is when you pull the plants from each side of each other, put them on a tailgate, and those responses and plant growth are identified rapidly once it's on the tailgate. What's it look like as it goes down through the season? as an opportunity, you generate more rapid development of the tillers, so they're not fighting for sunlight. They grow along with the main stem. And at the end of it all, when it gets to be the harvest period, you see that the heads are extremely even. So that when it comes time for harvest, you're not waiting for all these tillers to come up from the bottom that are nowhere near mature, and you're able to harvest a crop sooner, and the yield's coming from the better development basically of the tillers. There's a little bit coming from the main stems, but primarily from the better developed tillers is where we're getting the yield in a cereal crop. This is a large bunch. This is done at a different stage. I'm always focusing on different timings. This is done at the early elongation stage, just after herbicide. And you can see that it's generated even a different pigment in that straw. And that's why you see the different color in that straw, because of the streaming of all the food that's been brought up from the soil and a balanced appetite creates a different pigment. And that's why sometimes when you look at the crop and it has a different color, it's really the pigment in the plant. I've noticed that time and time again, especially when I put it with 28. So when I'm applying it to a stem, and that stem is green, the stem is generating photosynthesis that we identified with that equipment earlier. And you can see that it actually improves the development of the cell structure and the lignins that lay down on the outside of that stem. Yes, as you look inside the inner part of that stem, you'll see the vascular bundles are better developed and more definitive. And that's where the efficiencies of all the elements within the plant that create the yield are moving more freely and abundantly. So you look at the little picture down the corner, that was some trial work I was doing at the 3 and 4th, second and third leaf stage to see if I could change the size of the main stem and the tiller. And yes, it's exactly what can happen. Not that I advocate you guys go out there at the second and third leaf, but just so you learn that we're doing these studies to see what kind of impact. If I apply it at the 2 leaf, I get a much better main stem. If I apply it at the 2 leaf to 4 leaf during herbicide, I get a much more pronounced tiller. And those are the keys to our success. So there's a zoom in photograph of what that stem looks like when it's bisexually cut and performed. And that gives us more research from the university level to why do I see the standability? Why do I see these kind of photographs and pictures in fields over and over again? It's simply from the ability to create standability from that cell structure in the stem. You see the little black arrow there and it goes down, it's a little wiggly. Well, that's because the application was done by an airplane. And it was only one application at late season fungicide just south of Winnipeg. And that's something that you can see and identify over and over and over again. Now, what does the standability mean? Well, in this particular case, because it finished the crop better, there was adequate moisture for the biology to respond to the photosynthesis. I not only get standability, but I can get an ROI of gains anywhere between 8 and 12%. This one's identified at a yield gain of about 9%. Is that 9 or 10% of a 20 bushel crop or a 50 bushel crop? That percentage of yield gain is the same in structure all the way through. If it's a season, I'm going to get 10%. It's 10% of 20, which is 2, or it's 10% of 60, which is 6. It's not a functionality of 5 bushels, 5 bushels, 5 bushels. It's a functionality of percentage points. So as you go forward, there's different forms of application. This is on canola. This happened to be one of those whiz-bang applications. I have a number of people that have identified this year in, year out. This is simply one application at a half a liter an acre. And that's done at a reasonably later period herbicide application. And you can see that the plant had excellent growing conditions, was able to respond to those photosynthesis rapidly, and the development took right off. Of course, you can imagine the importance of that if that was during flea beetle season. Some guys have been known to do it with both their herbicides in an effort to push that crop ahead of the flea beetle issues. I don't expect you to read this, but again, like the one we had, the cell structure, I put this in here so you know that there's a lot of university work behind this product. As I identify differences in the field, I push that information uphill to the owners. I ask them to get the research done at the universities. So when I explain to you that, yes, when I put it with a fertilizer, or if I put it on as a foliar, these are the responses I get, and this is why. So this is, in particular, was a study that was done overseas when we were identifying the mineralization process when added to nitrogen. There was a research guy in Saskatchewan that just duplicated this last year. His presentation is online. He really didn't believe that I had such an impact on the mineralization. He compared it to a urease inhibitor when adding it to 28 as well as control, and ligno was on top a significant amount, a very high level. So what does that mean when I talk about mineralization in the soil? The plants to the left of this, the 5 pots there, some greenhouse work I was doing back in 2013, was in an effort to subdue the impacts of low salinity, not white soil, which I refer to as high salinity, but low salinity, which often is associated with different pHs and minerals that are antagonistic. When put into the soil and creates that energy, begins to grow the biology there, it gives the plant an opportunity to coordinate its efforts to sustain better development in those areas. Is it the be all and the end all? And saline, in moderate saline, it makes a big difference. You can grow a pretty reasonable crop right up to that slough. In heavy saline soils, I've got a number of products I'm working with in an effort to combine them to push back a very significant amount against these saline pockets. Have I got the answer to it all yet? No, I don't, but I know I'm getting closer and closer and closer. Excuse me. So this one is a photograph where it's been side banded in an application with 28. And I love this photograph because I've seen it off and on over the years. But the first thing a producer will look at that and go, I love it. The application must be on the right-hand side because look how robust and green and lush it is. Well, in actual fact, the Lignijoule and the 28 is on their left-hand side. Well, you'd almost think it's interfering with the nitrogen level. But in actual fact, what it's doing here is allowing a more regulated uptake of potash, copper, and boron. We've all heard from all these nutrient discussions of starters and foliars and all that jazz, that whenever we apply a high level of nitrogen up front, the plant goes on a luxury feeding of strictly and reducing the uptake of potash, copper, and boron. So in a tissue sample here, what we pick up is the fact that both sides have equal levels of nitrogen, but the side on the left have the appropriate balance of the copper, potash, and boron. So in other words, the poor crop on the left, or on the right, that's high excessive levels of N, because that is the way we have to farm over here. Not a lot of things we can do about that, is now susceptible to lodging, to drought stress, and disease because it's far too succulent. It's not got a balanced position to ward off any climatic conditions that may generate issues going down the road. Here's another one when it was applied to urea. I think I found a cooperator just recently in southern Alberta that's got a blending plant. I would love to put it on urea on a regular basis, but it acts as a humectant. So when I put it on urea, it's okay for an hour, but it turns into an ice cream cone in the back of the truck. So logistically, it's never been pursued commercially. But the lovely part of this is I'm going to work with a drying agent through Abdel from Omex, and we're going to work with a cooperator in southern Alberta, and we're going to look at applying it to urea. We'll use the drying agent so it doesn't create such a humectant process and absorb moisture out of the air so rapidly and drive this kind of response. I get this with 28 all the time, but I really love an opportunity to be able to put it with the 28. So what does that again turn out to look like later on? The story behind this field is here. Where the arrow is identifying the corner of a trial. The ligno and the 28 was applied at planting earlier on. Unfortunately, shortly thereafter, there was a gigantic rain that came across and slammed that soil solid, turned it into a rock, and the crop didn't come up. So the poor producer had to go back out and reseed on a diagonal, opposite angles to the trial, and called me up when he was out there spraying his fungicide at early bloom and said he could still see the section where we had applied the ligno and the 28 because it stabilizes it in that environment. That stability is so significant, I will not recommend anybody put it in a mid-row band because heaven forbid the weather turns dry after planting, it'll lock it up there out in the mid-row and the plant will start to get end-starved. Conversely though, if it's side-banded, you eliminate a lot of the volatilization and nitrification and turning it into a gas, ammonification. You actually protect the seed row because it reduces the amount of movement of those gases. And of course, it coordinates the release of the nitrogen. At the other end of the season, there's a hump here. This is simply putting it with a starter. And this was over manured. This field was, the feedlot was right behind this photograph. So it had boatloads of manure. It was actually interfering with the crop's ability to produce anything in that area. And soon as I put the Lignijoule with the starter, it balanced the uptake of all the nutrition so the crop could take off and utilize that abundance of food, where before it actually interfered with the growth. He would barely get a 30 bushel crop to the left. And these strips here, we never yielded, but he figured it was virtually a good 30% higher. So what do some of these numbers look like? All my research goes through various replicated plots through independent research facilities. This one is MARA, which is Mackenzie Applied Research Facility, and Ham and Ag, which is in southern Alberta. And these are the kind of numbers that are there. And you look at the yield gains. Think of it as a percentage, because you look at the number one is 60 bushels compared to adding 10. So I'm talking about a 12, maybe 13, 14%. Go over to the other side where it's 5 on top of 32. Well, you look at that again, that's around that 12 to 15%. It's a functionality of percentages. It's not, you know, look at that. Wouldn't it be nice to get 10 bushels on a 32 bushel crop? Well, it doesn't work like that very often. It does work on occasion. Then I move down the road and I look at what I can do if I work with putting it on seed. This is an application on soybean seeds. And you look at that photograph and you go, what a remarkable difference. Well, I'll tell you right now, the growing conditions were somewhat adverse, but it was able to push it through that adversity to the point where the bad weather wasn't impacting the early season development. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I doubled the crop load there. It looks like it will be a stupendous increase. But again, soybeans are hard to change. They're very resilient, like canola. It will come back from beaten up conditions. There's actually about a 4 bushel gain on both ends of the field. We did 500 to 600 feet on either side of the line, right to the line. And we ended up with an average of 4 bushels on the 2 weights and measures from that particular field. Excuse me. 2 of my other favorite crops for applying it on the seed, it comes in a 10-liter jug, is the application on peas and lentils. It is phenomenal on peas and lentils. I don't have the research work done at the universities to identify exactly why, but some of the scientists that I've worked with are indicating that it's moving within the endosperm of the seed, and it's changing the development of the RNA and DNA within that seed. Scientific stuff, I know we don't care about it. This is what we care about, what it looks like, and what kind of response we get when we use it in our fields. And where's the ROI? The ROI is in the data that's generated from multiple years of replicated work at research facilities, as well as many field strip trials where we do weights and measures in the field of 500 to 800 feet. I appreciate producers love to go that half mile, but with the glacier movements and developing our subsoils, our field could be flat as a pancake on top, with all the organic compounds laid down from the millennium, from the ice age to today. But underneath the paramaterials and the gravelly seams and the movement of sand, the variability is gigantic. It's like a huge mountain system underneath our soils. They look even on top from the vegetative growth over the decades, but in actual fact, below the soil surface, it's nothing but even. And that's why I like to stick to short weights and measures. Here's some more data. It was done at a research back in 2013 where I was developing different types of products for seed applications. We've now got that all figured out. So the ones you're getting now are the best yielding formulas we've been able to study and figure out. And these again are pretty significant yield bumps of anywhere between that 12 and 14, 15%. What does it look like in an adverse soil condition? This is in a sandy area of Manitoba. Simply put with a starter on the left. And it's very rapidly identified when you walk out in that field that there's a more robust number of well-developed heads on the treated side. That's simply because we've been able to help and aid that plant's ability to assimilate the efficiencies of nutrient uptake, because the mineralization process is all impacted by the microbiology that we're feeding with that energy and developing these changes. I like photographs, guys, because I'm a real seer too. I like to see the crop on top. I'm aware of what's going on in the soil, and that's where my greatest impacts are, but I love to see a good picture. Here's another application on canola where we're using it with first pass herbicides, second pass herbicides, even if it's just one over the years. So it's something that I can show you that it's going on over and over and over again. It's not just a one-hit wonder. It's been going on for years. And today we can spend a lot of money on things and not see the ROI. Here's another series of applications on crops that are showing a significant yield bump. I look for 70% of the time, somewhere between 8 and 12%. And then 15% of the time, it's from that 12% and up. And that up part is huge. And I call those sometimes a wild card, but they're realities. Then the other 15% of the time, it's like anything else in life. There's times when it's just very shallow responses, pay for product, get a bushel or so, maybe 5%, hard to identify, but that's only 15% of the time. The other 85% of the time, I'm getting significant opportunities for ROI. And here's again that slide with the 28. Ligno and 28, they are definitely in love. So just a closing remark here, guys. Please send your questions in. I wanted to make this as short and sweet as possible. Everybody's really busy today. I'd just like to answer any questions you may have that would help us start to have this paradigm shift to understand what impact can we have on the subsoil below the plant, and what kind of impact will that have on our disease pressures? Because every time we change that environment down below through our cultural practices of farm production today has an impact on that soil. And that soil is what houses all our disease and all the bugs. Anything I can do to push back against the development of a disease or a pest, I'm getting ahead of the curve. And my yields go up and my year-to-year opportunities move forward, because if I change that soil environment, I can now have greater nutrient efficiency. I can take in more water and flush it through more rapidly. I can sustain more adverse conditions more often. Thanks very much. I'd like to open it up for any questions, if there happen to be any right now, please.
Scott, yeah, just have one question here. If you didn't have the ability to put it in furrow, what would be your recommendation?
I would put it with a herbicide. I'm a big fan of putting it with a herbicide, because that's when you're out there doing your job. Absolutely. My other favorite application on canola, if you have the opportunity, is talk to Daryl and the boys about getting some G22, get a little bit of boron, get a little bit of ligno, put it on canola at full cabbage, and step back and watch. That is no bolts, no herbicide, just a small little dose of everything put together, and the growth response and yield opportunity at full cabbage is nothing but spectacular.
Next question is, will it help early maturity to canola? Will it help canola to early mature?
Okay, the whole maturity thing, I wish I could put my finger on it. I would say it has moderate effects. Mostly it has its impact if it's being applied, whether it's in the soil or whether it's foliar on substandard soil areas. So if there's a 40-acre patch out there that you're always waiting on to do your harvest, you'll see that those patches are brought on more evenly. I've never had any work that shows that I'm going to change the days to harvest by 3 days or 4 days. I can't put my finger on it because the data does not have any consistency. It's all over the map. But I know in substandard areas of the field, I definitely bring the crop to fruition sooner than if I didn't do anything at all.
Why does Lignijoule seem to work so well on barley?
Barley, of all the grasses, I was reading a research paper some years ago, and it identified the fact that barley is the worst at coordinating the processes of photosynthesis. That's all it is. And because we aid in the plant to create more photosynthesis, that's primarily why I suspect that question's coming from somebody who uses it on barley, because you can see it on barley in a heartbeat. But the question is this, for me in my ROI work, unfortunately, barley's not worth what wheat is per pound. So the ROI is virtually identical in barley and wheat. Yes, it has a greater impact on the barley's physical development, but yet the ROI is very similar to that of wheat, simply because wheat's worth more money than barley.
Can you please explain the more on syndrome? I get asked why we generally don't put more product on for larger results.
I love that one. I never forget the day I came up with that one. Okay, folks, for those that don't understand where that came from, I'll split the word up. Please, please, please do not get stuck in what I call the more on syndrome. That means more on the crop does not mean more bushels at the end. So you get started with this type of technology and you see a whiz bang response of 15%, and you'd spent, I think, a half-liter application, which is 40 grams, is about 350 or so. So you get 10 bushels all of a sudden 1 year for 350. Well, we're humans. The first thing I say to myself, well, man, I'm doubling up. If I can get 10 bushels for 350, I'm going to get 20 bushels for 7. And as soon as you breach the 3/4 liter mark, the energy that you're applying to that plant is overabundance. And the plant can't utilize it, and it starts to push back. There's no damage, no harm, no foul. You just don't make any money. It gets to the point where you hit that ceiling of response. There's no more response to be made. And I've been in fields where they've inadvertently doubled the application when they're mixing up their sprayer, and I get a call in a panic. What's going to happen? And it's basically, relax, don't worry. You're going to super energize the plant, but all it's going to happen is you're going to get stuck in the more-on syndrome, because now the plant is not utilizing the energy. It's actually screaming back at it going, I can't handle this. And this comes back to the whole physiological development of a plant. Over the millenniums, the earth has developed and plants have developed a way of resisting a solar flare. Right now, if anybody's in astrology, they'll know we're in a very low cycle of solar flares. But we just came out of one that was extremely high. Well, the plant has built-in self-protective mechanisms within inside to be able to push back against that excessive energy generated from that solar flare. So that's where the whole more-on syndrome, the energy thing comes. And that's part of the more-on syndrome, is because I add a little of this and a little of that, a little of this, a little of that. Next thing, I got a boatload of food in my tank, and I put it on the crop. And it's like, well, where's my ROI? Well, it hasn't hurt the plant. You didn't see anything physically harmful. But when you take the combine out there, because the plant was resisting all that energy, it's pushed back and you've lost that yield gain. And that's when it becomes a syndrome, because a little bit's good, but that doesn't mean more is better. Hope that explained it.
What rate of ligno do you recommend when going with a herbicide application?
Anywhere between 1/2 and 3/4 of a liter.
Can you explain why we've seen very good results in the Peace Country?
Well, I think part of what I've seen in the Peace Country is there's longer days of photosynthetic development. So if this product goes on a crop and it has a big impact for 7 to 10 days on the photosynthetic process, if I've got an extra 2.5, 3 hours of sunlight in a day, it only stands to reason I can drive that process and drive those exudates for a longer period of time at a higher quantity. I have a greater impact on the soil's ability to release the food for the plant.
And just the last one, where is it available near Red Deer?
Red Deer would be Lignijoule, which is northwest of Edmonton, or Vegreville at New Earth Solutions.
That's it for questions right now, Scott. I don't know if you have any more in your presentation, but right now that's basically it.
Well, folks, good luck out there. This is one of those science projects that have been a wonderful thing to follow and track. It's really helped develop my career. And just let you know that moving forward, I was hoping to have 2 brand new ones coming in. I got one for sure from overseas in Europe. And it's a plant extract and several other elements. Unfortunately, I'm having difficulty getting the product in from Australia. It's a nitrifying bacteria that actually inoculates the leaf tissue of corn, canola, and sorghum. But our governments just aren't on the same page yet. So I think I'm going to be testing just one new one. But I've also got another couple other biologicals I'm working with. So stay tuned to the boys that are connected to the CLSs of the world, because they're the real innovators. They're the ones that are on top of all this regenerative processing. And it's going to change the whole way we look at farming today, because as soon as you identify your ability to reduce disease and push back against it, you're going to find a reduction in the process of using other fungicides. And when you can do that, you generate more soil profile because you're not interfering with beneficials. It just starts to unfold and roll ahead, guys. We're at a time in agriculture that's so exciting, but I want to throw a cautionary out. They'll always show me the data. You've got to have data. If you don't have good data, you can't make good business decisions. And today's cost of producing a crop, you're all in up front, and we have so many adverse conditions. You got to make sure that those decisions are made for the right reasons on data.
Are we unmuted, Scott?
Yep.
Now, can you hear me, Scott?
Yes, I can.
Darcy Nestle here, Scott.
Hi, Darcy.
Can you explain the difference between the lignin and the coal-based humic? You did show pictures in there.
Yeah,
Is there a difference? Is it purely a carbon source?
No, it's gigantic. They're not even really in the same book. Right there. So the difference is this: when you remove the lignins from a live plant-based source like pulp, you can actually react it with oxygen and create the solubility. So a really good way of defining the two differences. One of the reasons you get coal products that are humic acid is because there's no energy in them because they can't burn them as an energy source. That's why it's a waste product. It goes off to the side because they can't use the Leonardite coal for anything. There's no energy. And then somebody came along and said, well, the science shows that if we apply humic acids, we can get blah, 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 and fix all our soils. Well, I've been tracking humic acid from coal for 30 years. And I've got research I did on soybeans 5 years ago. Daryl says, Scotty, you got to do more trials. You got to do more research. Everybody wants this humic acid stuff, blah, 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 blah. I said, okay, I'll do it again. I've been doing it off and on, like I said, for 30 years. And there we go. Lo and behold, I got zero yield by putting it in the furrow with soybeans. And as soon as I used the ligno, it was three bushels and change. They just don't have the activity. The solubility of them is so low that it takes so much energy for the soil to break it down that by the time the soil environment spends all that energy breaking it down and assimilating it, the net gain is virtually nothing, unless you're in a seriously bad soil. If you're trying to do soil remediation, yes, I see the humic acids have a place because I've seen them work, but that's only one part. I might have to put down a bunch of lime, a bunch of boron, a bunch of other things to create the solubility and get it moving and change the fluctuation of the soil, and then I can flush the salts through. But again, the salts have to have somewhere to go. And again, show me the data. Can anybody get a hold of a humic acid product and send me some data to prove to me that there's a need for me to go back out and open up the research book and go back and spending money on developing research? Because I don't see the data coming out from these guys. There's a huge difference right there. I've got multitude of years of scientific research from universities from around the world, as well as all the ROI work I've done in Western Canada. And these guys are selling a humic acid. They got all these stories, but no data. Show me the data, and I'll consider it again. Absolutely. That's the key.
Okay. Yeah. Now we'll talk remediation a little bit. Or, if you were could you replace on saline, or would you recommend doubling up your lignin over, say, 200 pounds of coal-based humic?
Well, until they show me the data, I can't make that decision.
Okay.
I have no idea the water solubility. I don't know the molecular size of the carbons that are in there, so I don't know the activity or the energy of them. Show me the energy level, and then I can make a recommended rate. They're just pulling rates out of the air.
Right. Okay.
So how do you make an economical decision without the data? I don't understand.
Right. Yeah. You talked about peas and the seed treatment side of it. Is that in furrow, or did you actually treat the seed?
No, there's formulas that are in a jug, and a jug of 10-liter jug treats 500 to 550 bushels of peas. And in that application, the active ingredient we're usually around that 3.5 bushel mark. So you're using, in actual fact, about 3.5 to 4 grams of active lignin per acre. That's how low it is. There's another difference. If I'm putting ligno into fertilizer at 600 mils, I'm doing about 60 grams per acre, not 200 pounds. How's 200 pounds compared to 60 grams? That's beyond me.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then the guys say, well, we got a better product. Well, they're not even in the same textbook.
And you can put the lignin with the inoculated pea. You can put it with inoculant
Yeah,
fine.
actually, because it's a biopolymer made from the lignins, it actually works as a really good safety net on the inoculant. I prefer to put it right with the inoculant when I'm treating seed.
Okay. Is there like any? Does it get too sticky or no molasses? How about amino acids in it?
Well, you mean if you've got amino acids in the mix?
Yeah.
Like, there's no amino acids in ligno, so you're adding the amino acids to the seed treat.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I just wondered about just if it, what we're gonna, if we can get it too sticky, the product, or no concerns there.
It's not the stickiness so much. I actually run into issues when I'm trying to get commercial applications done to do some of my field work, right? And I find that I have to have a certain amount of moisture to make sure that the lignin actually bleeds into the seed before it dries. Otherwise, it just dusts off and I lose it. So I actually have to watch that I use enough water to make sure that the Lignijoule penetrates the seed coat before it dries up and dusts off.
Okay.
Now, when I start adding energy to these cytokinins and stuff, I've got to watch that I don't over-energize that, right? So again, it's like showing me the study work that I know I'm not applying too much energy to that seed and end up with being in the moron syndrome. At what level am I over-applying these materials and over-energizing that seed and I lose my impacts? That's my concern. I know there's hundreds of thousands of acres of ligno on seed out there. And I can only imagine there's lots of guys putting it with different types of seed materials. And if there was a problem, I'm sure Daryl would have heard about it by now.
Yeah. Okay. I think, yeah, answered most. I'd be interested to try some, like everybody on this webinar and through Western Canada, it's our, try to remediate our saline soils a little bit. And so it's all about the bug then, really. It's about feeding that bug, really, what it's all about.
It is, either through the photosynthates that are exudating through the plant or energizing the environments there and sustaining good development from them. Absolutely. You bet. Yeah.
So it makes a good fit with ACF then, or not?
I haven't got the work done on it. I don't know if there's a stacking effect there or not.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I know John Wong, he always likes the idea of adding some kind of a humic source to his ACF when he's talking in some of his presentations. But I just called him again about last week regards to other projects I've got on the go with the ACF, because I'm trying to neutralize the salts in 1034O. Then I got a formula from another chap in the industry, and all of a sudden I'm having to use a boatload of humic acid. So I called John, he goes, no, that's too much. So by the time I subdue the salts in the 1034O so I can add a bacteria source to it, I've over applied the humates to the point that I can't apply the ACF. So I still can't, I know low levels, but nobody's got a definitive answer. Too new. I mean, it's only 3 years into the ag industry here in Western Canada, so we don't have the data yet, right? Can't answer that question yet.
So correct me if I'm wrong or fill me in where I'm wrong. If we were trying to remediate some marginal land, if you don't have bugs to start with, then the lignin's not feeding nothing.
Well, there are always bugs in that environment because I have in a moderate saline, like in this photograph here, that's a moderately saline pocket area. It's heavy soil, and I've been able to remediate it a little bit, right? And I can grow, you know how you have that slough in the middle of the field and you drive around it, or, if it's dries out, you drive through it, right? Yeah. I can grow a crop right up to the edge where the salts are moderate. But if I drive through that saline pocket where the salts are extreme, I can't do it with just ligno. It's going to take a bit of humic acid. It's going to take lime, maybe gypsum, and it's going to take humic acid, and then a little push from ligno at starting time. It's a culmination of many things. And I know the ACF work I did last year in a saline pocket, and that chap has ligno in his starter system. as I grew a beautiful crop in that moderately saline with the added feature of the ACF. It took it up another level. So now I'm talking humic acid, ACF, calcium, lime. I mean, you could have $50 an acre into that before we recover. And then I still don't know if that's long term.
Well, you're right there, yeah, yeah. But we don't have a lot of alternatives, though. You either don't farm it and just forget about it,
Yeah.
or you tile it for $1,000,
Yep.
or you try $50 an acre in a couple of years and you're only at 100 and see if it works.
That's right. I agree. Yep. And the more people that do trials and we can track them together, the faster we'll get ahead on these. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
that's all my questions. Appreciate all your answers then, Scott.
Yep. Thanks, Darcy. Good to hear from you.
Scott, I was just wondering about here, what about flea beetles in canola?
I definitely have an impact when I can get a push on growth. So I'm not so much measuring the bricks and interfering with their desire to chew on the canola. I'm trying to push the crop ahead of, so it can produce more growth to get ahead of the flea beetles, is what I've identified. I'm more akin to making sure that I've got a pop-up starter of some of these high quality starters like Alpine and Omex and all those. That's really where I have a greater pushback against flea beetles and an effort to change the sugar content of that canola. But I can't say I do that with just a straight ligno as a foliar. I wouldn't say I am. It takes a culmination of things. But I can push the crop with, there's a couple of chaps I work with that started doing it twice with both herbicides, and they have virtually no issue of flea beetles at all. But it's not because of the sugar content in the bricks. It's more that they just drive that crop so hard, it just grows ahead of the flea beetle problem.
Good stuff. Nope, sounds good. I think that's it for questions here. If anybody has any questions on where to get the product, don't hesitate to call us at CLS directly. We'll make sure that you get in touch. Of course, 204-483-2774. And I think that's it, Scotty.
Excellent. Thanks, gentlemen. That was fun. Hope it helped everybody.
Have a great day.
Okay, cheers. Bye for now.